What is going on, folks? I'm Des with DesFit, and this is the Galaxy Watch from Samsung. So I've been testing the Galaxy Watch for about the last 4 to 5 weeks, focusing especially on the fitness side of this device, but I also did explore the smartwatch experience with both an iPhone as well as an Android phone. But before we get into the actual review, if you're into fitness and sports technology like this, I'd encourage you to subscribe for in-depth reviews of everything from smartwatches to action cameras to bikes and other fun stuff. I tend to go into quite a bit of detail just so you can get a better idea of how it's going to work for you. So if this video did help you out at all, please hit that like button down below. So the Galaxy Watch is Samsung's newest wearable that takes on a new name, ditching the Gear naming convention that ties it closer to their phones. And just like previous generation, it's really attractive, and this 42mm midnight black GPS version has a ton of class. I quite like using the Tizen operating system along with the rotating bezel and that jaw-droppingly good-looking touchscreen display, which is very predictable even while using the small keyboard layout, which is surprisingly usable. In terms of durability, I'm not exactly the easiest on devices, and this device held up really well even in some tougher conditions. The battery life is going to depend on how you use it. When I did not use GPS, I could squeak almost 3 days out of it, but if you're using GPS, let's say for about an hour per day, expect more like 1 to 2 days out of it. But do note that it takes about 2 hours for a complete charge from empty. In terms of the smartwatch experience, I pair it with both iPhones as well as a Google Pixel 2, since they do advertise that it's compatible with both iOS as well as Android. When the Galaxy Watch is paired with an iPhone, you'll get one-way notifications that you can dismiss, and then you can answer or decline calls from the watch, but I wasn't able to actually take calls on the watch itself. It actually prompted me to speak on my iPhone. The interaction with the device is pretty much going to be the same sort of experience you'll have on any watch that's not an Apple Watch, but the advantage of the Galaxy Watch is that you get to use that sweet display with the rotating bezel. Plus, if you're not a fan of rectangular watches, this will be right up your alley. But in the 3 or so weeks that I tested the Galaxy Watch with an iPhone, I did actually have to repair it with the iPhone a couple times after it just would not connect. And I don't know if this was iOS or the Galaxy Watch, I'm just telling you that it happened. So after using it for a few weeks with the iPhone, I tested it with the Google Pixel 2. But paired to an Android phone, the experience gets a lot better with more robust notifications, and with text messages, you'll actually be able to reply to text with predefined responses. You can use voice dictation, you can also send emojis, and then you can use that surprisingly usable keyboard. In addition, you can also take calls directly on the watch itself using its onboard microphone and speaker.
Hello?
Are you writing right now?
But there will be some differences in what is available for Galaxy apps on iOS versus Android. For instance, there aren't any paid options like some of those really nice looking watch faces that are available for Android but aren't on iOS. But the selection of apps basically isn't quite as robust on iOS. However, Spotify is available for both offline music storage and playback on both operating systems. For the active side of the watch, you're going to have the typical daily stuff like steps, calories burned, and floors climbed. I did find the steps to be a little bit high, the calories burned to be maybe a little bit low, but the floors climbed came up short compared to other test devices. It has a fairly good selection of activity profiles, but just note that some of these are actually individual movements which are part of a more complete workout routine. For instance, they have the most common activities like running, cycling, swimming, and weight training as you would normally expect, but then they also have very specific movements like arm curls and crunches, which can actually identify the reps that you perform. And I found the recognition to be quite good. For nearly everything I tried, it was spot on with the rep counting, and there's even situations like arm extensions where they show you just one of many ways that you can perform this exercise, and I was actually able to do it in a different variation that still yielded an accurate result. Do note that for exercises that do not involve wrist motion, it doesn't do the rep counting for pretty obvious reasons. But what is cool is that you can combine these activities. So once you complete a specific activity, you can choose next workout from the end screen, which will prompt you to choose the next activity. And then at the end of your entire session, it'll give you a nice summary screen of what you did on the watch itself. Pretty neat. And then the Galaxy Watch also does have automatic workout detection, which I found to work pretty darn well. What is strange though is that even though it was quite good at the rep counting, it wasn't good at tracking both strokes and the stroke type for swimming. You can see here that it missed quite a few strokes on some of these laps, and I only did freestyle and breaststroke. However, cadence for running did seem to produce some good results. So the fitness features of this device work pretty darn well for the most part, but there are two core functions that are the cornerstones of a true fitness device, and that's going to be GPS and heart rate. What I first discovered about GPS is that acquiring a GPS signal was frustrating. I tried this both paired to my phone as well as unpaired to test standalone GPS, and it was pretty hit and miss. So here are some tests that I did in the exact same location, just at different times of the day. I had a couple occasions where it acquired in 20 seconds or less. However, those were kind of the exception to the rule. I actually had more occasions where even after 5 minutes, it never even acquired a GPS signal. And even more disappointing is that it doesn't seem to cache my GPS location, which should in turn lead to a faster acquisition the next time around. So apparently it doesn't do that. However, when it did acquire a GPS signal, distances were generally fairly close to other test devices, although most of the time they were just a hair short on distance. And then if we take a look at the map here, we can see that the sampling rates are a little bit hit and miss where it cuts some corners quite a bit. But unfortunately, the news gets a little bit worse. You can see here that on quite a few occasions, it wasn't really close to other test devices. And then there were occasions where it was way off, like on this run. And then finally, I had one run that was an absolute mess where it went completely off the rails. And GPS can act kind of screwy around tall buildings or in urban environments, but this was in a wide open park and along some very open streets. So GPS was a little bit rough, but unfortunately Heartrate kind of follows those same trends. On a few occasions, it actually was kind of close, but then again, it kind of just went off the rails. But this wasn't an isolated situation. I actually experienced this a lot, sometimes with it just not recording at all. And the thing is, I experienced the same thing a handful of times last year with the Gear Sport. And to be fair, all wrist-based heart rate sensors can have bad days, but it just seemed like the Galaxy Watch had a case of the Mondays a lot more than others. But here's another situation where it's fairly close to 3 other heart rate sensors, but again, I had a lot of situations where it just was not ever recorded. And if you think I have a faulty device, well, you very well may be right, but I encourage you to look at some comments on some other videos and in some forums where people are experiencing the exact same thing. And what could make this better is if you could pair it with an external heart rate sensor, but I was not able to pair it to any external sensors that I owned. And I do know about that sporty watch face that can pair to an external sensor, but apparently it won't transmit that data to an actionable activity. And if I'm wrong about that, please let us know in the comments. But one last thing I do want to go over is the Samsung Health app, which hasn't really seen many changes over the last year from what I can tell. And I think is still a weak point for the Galaxy Watch and other Gear wearables. And that's whether you're paired to an iPhone or an Android phone. Fitbit and Garmin Connect are examples of a pretty darn good smartphone app experience, and smartwatch manufacturers need to pay a lot of special attention to this because if the smartphone app experience sucks, that is not going to keep people on the platform. Samsung Health definitely needs some improvement, but don't think I'm just picking on Samsung. Apple has that whole weird experience with health, activity, and the watch app too, so don't think I'm letting them slide. I do want to point out, though, that on Android, you'll have the ability to export a GPX file of GPS data for most outdoor activities, but that function is not available on iOS. So if you do want to look at that data in detail, I would actually recommend to use the Endomondo app, which is a much better experience, which does allow you to export a TCX file from the website, which contains a more complete data set. So the Galaxy Watch comes with a lot of neat fitness features, but the 2 core functions that lay the groundwork for a true fitness device leaves a lot to be desired. And that leaves me disappointed because I like this watch in so many other areas. It's got a great build to it and it's just so attractive, and I do like using that Tizen operating system. The automatic workout detection worked well, and I was also impressed by the automatic rep counting. And this is also a pretty good alternative to an Apple Watch, but just note that just like any other watch that's not an Apple Watch, it will have limitations, but that's due to the lockdown on Apple's ecosystem. Although this is a new device, I don't necessarily think that it made a lot of improvements from last year, and as some subscribers pointed out, it actually does not come with MST, which was present on some older devices. And with the fact that the fitness performance of this device didn't necessarily make an improvement either, that leaves me thinking that this is just more of a rebranding of their wearables from last year. And I'm very deliberate in using the word disappointing, just because I think Samsung has a great device here, but they are missing out on a big audience that wants a great smartwatch along with usable fitness functionality. But heart rate and GPS are kind of the cornerstones of a true fitness device, and a device can have a million features, but if those 2 things don't work, well, then I'm not sure it could be considered a true fitness device. And here's the thing, smartphone manufacturers have a huge advantage over companies like Garmin and Fitbit because they make both the watch as well as the phone. They can have exclusive features that other companies just can't tap into, so if they can build a really awesome and usable fitness experience, they can have a huge upper hand on these other companies. So at the end of the day, this is a great smartwatch, especially when it's paired to an Android phone, and the iPhone experience isn't bad either. So if you're more of a gym goer that doesn't necessarily care about heart rate, then this could be a good option. But if you demand usable data from the fitness end of things, you may want to consider some other options. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching, and if this video did help you out at all, please hit that like button down below, and also subscribe to the channel for in-depth reviews of fitness and sports technology that's coming soon. And in the meantime, go have fun with your fitness, and we will see you in the next video.